Welcome to the Med Madness podcast, where we break down complex medical concepts to help you succeed in your USMLE exams. I'm your host, and today we'll be diving into the fascinating world of cellular transport. By the end of this episode, you'll have a clear understanding of the different mechanisms cells use to transport molecules across their membranes, and how this knowledge is crucial for your medical studies. Let's get started. Next, let's discuss how cells rely on various transport mechanisms to maintain homeostasis and function effectively. Understanding these processes is fundamental for any aspiring medical professional. Today, we'll cover three primary types of cellular transport: simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and active transport. We'll also touch on other relevant mechanisms like endocytosis and the importance of stereoselectivity in carrier-mediated transport. To illustrate these concepts, let's begin with a brief real-life case study. Imagine a patient with diabetes mellitus who experiences episodes of hyperglycemia. This condition is often managed by regulating the patient's glucose levels through insulin therapy. Insulin facilitates the uptake of glucose into cells via a specific transport mechanism, which we will discuss in detail shortly. Next, let's discuss how simple diffusion works. Simple diffusion is the movement of molecules through a membrane without the aid of carrier proteins. This process is driven purely by the concentration gradient of the molecules. For example, gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide diffuse directly through the cell membrane because of their small size and nonpolar nature. The rate of simple diffusion increases with higher concentration gradients, lower molecular weight, larger diffusion surface area, thinner membrane thickness, and higher lipophilicity of the molecules, moving on to facilitated diffusion. Facilitated diffusion requires carrier proteins to move molecules across the cell membrane. These proteins undergo conformational changes to transport their specific substrates. An important aspect of facilitated diffusion is that it shows saturation at high substrate concentrations, known as the transport maximum, TM, similar to the Vmax in enzyme kinetics. One well-known example is the GLUT family of proteins, which transport glucose. GLUT4, an insulin-sensitive transporter, is found in skeletal muscle cells and adipocytes. Under the influence of insulin, GLUT4 is incorporated into the cell membrane, increasing the rate of glucose uptake. Another important transporter, GLUT2, facilitates the export of glucose from the liver, small intestine, and kidneys, and plays a role in insulin secretion regulation. Now let's talk about active transport. Active transport moves substances against their concentration gradient and requires energy. This process is essential for maintaining concentration differences across membranes. There are two types of active transport. Primary active transport uses ATP directly to transport molecules. Secondary active transport uses the energy from the co-transport of another substance down its gradient. An example of secondary active transport is the Na-glucose symporter, which is found in intestinal and renal tubular epithelium. This transporter moves glucose into cells against its concentration gradient by using the energy from sodium moving down its gradient. Finally, to wrap up, let's summarize the key points covered today. We discussed the three primary types of cellular transport: simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and active transport. Each mechanism plays a crucial role in maintaining cellular function and homeostasis. Understanding these processes is essential for diagnosing and treating various medical conditions. Before we end, here's another real-life case study. Consider a patient with a genetic disorder that affects the GLUT4 transporter, leading to impaired glucose uptake in muscle cells. This condition can result in chronic hyperglycemia and necessitates careful management through diet and medication. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Med Madness. Don't forget to engage with the pre- and post-podcast quizzes and Anki flashcards for effective study. These tools will help reinforce your understanding and ensure you're well prepared for your exams. Until next time, keep learning and stay curious.